Are you concerned about your privacy, especially as you develop products for your business or gather competitive intelligence or otherwise use information in a business setting? Well, you should be. I'm Justin Hitt from Inside Strategic Relations. We talk a little bit about how we can use information to control access to resources, as well as the concept of funneling down information to points where you can have control of the point while the distribution of the information maybe goes, a video that goes viral or something that goes into mainstream. These are things that you can use to control when you're promoting or looking to persuade a marketplace. So there's two concepts here. The first concept is, how do we protect your privacy, your personal information, your identity? And second, how do we use an awareness of that protection scheme to reduce the chances that someone will get access, or that someone will prevent you from seeing information, or otherwise constrain your abilities to make accurate decisions? So here's what we're talking about. First off, you'll notice that talk show hosts attract an audience. Now, this may seem unrelated, but stick with me here. This is very important when it comes to your privacy. Let's say you have a favorite talk show host, Ben Shapiro, the late night show with David Letterman, or you love Johnny Carson or something like that. And there's enough people in your demographic, because the topic area could be cryptocurrency, could be a certain AI technology or something you're using to develop a product, but you go to some source of information about a certain topic. Now, today we have YouTube and we have all these different places to go to get information. You can buy a course, you can buy a book at Amazon, and this information comes to you, and you can use this information, whether it's entertainment, in the sense of listening to maybe a conservative or a liberal or a libertarian commentator. It could be topic-based, like getting a book on cryptocurrency or money laundering or some other risk management category. It could be attending a training class that's specifically tied to that product you're developing or that activity you're going to do in the business. Each of these things represent signals. Why is this important? In today's economy, we have a attention-based economy, and your data has value. How does that data have value? Well, these signals in the marketplace telegraph your activities and behaviors. If you're actually money laundering, and so there's all these laws about terrorist financing and money laundering and bank secrecy. If you're actually money laundering and you are in a case where you have a large amount of illicit funds and you're not sure how to wash that money, you may actually go get books that are risk management related books for anti-money laundering laws, stories about how people have corrupted things or laundered money in the past. If you get a large number of these books, it could indicate that you're in a position to start laundering money, or in my case, you write policies for banks and you help them create controls to prevent money laundering. But there's a signal there. That signal is a concentration of activity that identifies a behavior. Now, I mentioned commentators. Ben Shapiro has a show. If you like Ben Shapiro and you are similar to the rest of his audience and favorable to Ben Shapiro, if Ben Shapiro recommends a VPN provider, you have a higher probability of following that recommendation, because there is a little bit of bias here. There's a little bit of you trust this individual, and now you purchase this VPN, which concentrates your access to the internet. So if you're a VPN is a virtual private network that gives you security from your system to the VPN server out on the internet. And so if you're at a coffee shop and you're using your laptop, a VPN is a great way to go to not be seen or not to send any plain text traffic to the internet. Now remember, internet security and all this stuff is extremely complex. My key points here is the concentration of information makes it easier to read the signals of what you're doing and what you're not doing. A business VPN is going to concentrate your traffic into a private network within the constraints of a corporation. So if you're researching a new article or a new product, or you're doing business development, especially with remote workers, you want to have a VPN that takes people into your private network environment, and then it is secured so that nothing of that communication can reach the outside world. But you have to understand the vulnerability of the concentration. So getting your ideas and concepts from a single source, we wouldn't use just one source to guide everything in our life. We use sources relevant to individual topics. We don't use just one tool to, the hammer isn't the only tool to do all construction. That having those points of concentration become vulnerabilities when we are not clear on how the system works. So in the example of the VPN, you're going from your desktop to the servers at the VPN and then out onto the plain internet. If someone wanted to gather information about a particular audience, they could offer a real high quality sponsorship deal to somebody who already has that audience, and then on the back end collect information, filter content, limit what somebody can see under the guise of malware or identity protection. And so we have to be aware of these things. So what we're really talking about here is if you are going to gain access to somebody, or you're going to censor somebody's behavior, you don't have to directly go and do that. If you want to determine, in a case of corporate espionage, what a company is working on, you don't have to be inside the company to see those things. We can use signals in the marketplace. So I talked about purchase data. If an organization is developing a new battery, you can look at shipments of resources to a particular location and derive from those resources what type of development they're doing. So if they're ordering cobalt and lithium, and they're ordering a certain type of battery or a certain grade of cable, you can determine that get a good idea of what they're doing because of, again, the signals in the marketplace. Now you might be saying, well, Justin, how am I going to get this information? How am I going to determine what's being shipped to the company? Am I going to sit outside my car and have binoculars and my my black coffee and just scope things out? Well, no. You can actually buy shipping data from resources that collect that information. So you can look at the types of products that are being purchased by a particular area. Now, this data comes from a variety of sources. One, it could be looking at the transactions for a specific company purchased through their credit card provider. Now, it's going to give you a lot of data. There is a thing about the NSA pulling metadata. Metadata is very useful. It allows you to narrow the scope and focus and determine what's being purchased, what's not. You could place an employee at the location who would gather that information, or take somebody out to lunch. You see in the Project Veritas, they go out and interview people and get damning information. You can buy a data set that cross-references and helps you determine the location itself. There's information available in offering products and services to that company that you suspect they want to buy, generating a lead, and then flipping them over into the actual product and service. So now you've got an idea of what they're requesting or what they're looking for. You can go look at the keynote speeches, the patents they produce, the communications the company has. There's multiple pieces of information that come together in order to give you a full picture of what the next step might be or what a solution might be. My larger point in this particular conversation is to get you thinking about the complexity of situations and how there are a variety of signals in the engagement of that situation that could telegraph or identify what you're looking to answer for. So in the case of a corporate espionage, your organization doing a press release about this latest technology, trying to build up leads, for example, could telegraph the fact that you're actually working on that technology. So you need to now think about time to market. You need to think about how you're going to position the solution, what information you might present that distracts competitors, and then ultimately focus on that market plan to develop customers before your product is complete. Because in the case of an intellectual property research, it's not likely that you're the only one in the world developing that. In the case of battery technology, for example, there's a lot of companies that are putting money into that. There's research. There's employees that are moving between organizations. And so even if it's not deliberate, there's small leakages of information. So we overcome that by time to market. How quickly can we get the product to market in a minimal viable state so that we can start acquiring customers? What can we do about licensing? What can we do about confidentiality agreements? What can we do about preventing the leak that doesn't distract from the end result, which is monetizing the solution? So you may have a piece of intellectual property. I do this myself. I'll be writing a book, and I'll go ahead and disclose that I'm writing a book, and then I'll invite people to come in and ask their questions, and then I'll use their questions to develop my book or product. And in that case, I'm building leads, and I'm also generating some consulting income. It is entirely possible that I'll start that process and find out that nobody's interested. I'll start that process and find out that there are people that are interested, but they want to hire me immediately, and I'll make more money doing the work than I will write the book. I might find out that the book has maybe I'm too broad with the topic, and I need to narrow the scope. I need to narrow the scope in the audience, or I need to narrow the scope in the content. But I'm using signals in the marketplace in order to make that decision. Not a single signal, but I'm using the listeners' interactions on a podcast. I'm using a survey. I'm using other people asking questions between each other, and I'm looking into that conversation and I'm taking notes. I'm looking at other books that were published. So there's a plan in place to go pull these additional resources, identify the signals, add context and meaning to those signals, both by if I see X, then I can expect Y, but also challenging the X and Y relationship. So if somebody writes me a question about risk management, are they an individual who wants to hire somebody to do risk management? Are they an individual who is in the risk management profession trying to improve their own business? Or is this somebody who's just curious? So building these things out is why we use written plans. So in the case of security, before you choose a VPN provider, you're going to want to do some homework. Do they keep logs? Do they verify information? Where is it plain text? Do they have modern security? Are they proxying? Are there any types of identification? For example, a lot of VPN providers will connect you to the nearest location, which they have a server, and that actually telegraphs your actual location. Because if you're in Virginia and you keep getting a Virginia site and they've got one site in every state, then somebody in North Carolina is likely to get a North Carolina site, and now you've narrowed the focus of the individual. We want to look at the simple solution to kind of get us started, but then ask questions about that solution in order to develop a comprehensive approach. Now, there's a warning here. The more comprehensive, I heard this all the time in the Fortune 100 companies, the more comprehensive the solution is, the more likely the solution has gaps. We don't want comprehensive and we don't want simple. We want eloquent. We want the minimum viable product. We want to understand the situation and, of course, the signals that we're producing in the marketplace. And we want to be aware of both how we can leverage the technology or how we can leverage the situation and how other people can distort or otherwise compromise the situation. You're going to go through a couple hours of setup, design, plan, write down a plan, and then you're going to take action. Because, again, the action itself, the having the product in the marketplace, those types of things are more valuable than some of the behind-the-scenes work. So one of the things that I do with clients is I help them focus their behavior on the best and most valuable outcome. So I have the tendency sometimes to drill down too far or to do too much homework or to get into that analysis paralysis. So I use disdain for effort, I use time limitations, and then I use clearly defined outcomes in order to move in a direction where I gain productivity, I gain peak performance, rather than I gain activity, which produces very little results. Can you see where we're going at here? The world is very dangerous, Everybody is trying to steal your data and your identity. Your data has a market value, especially if you're working on intellectual property. There's strategic intelligence to gain in how other people collect data that you could use on your own. The government doesn't have to spy on you. They can just buy data, just like I can buy data. And an example of that would be if I'm trying to find customers who are senior level executives who live in a certain area and who have an interest in building business relationships. I can do that by renting the mailing list to certain publications. I can rent a demographic list, and then I can cross-reference the two, and that'll give me the individuals that have the highest probability of both being demographically qualified and topically qualified for something that I might put out there. Then I can do lead generation to see who raises their hands, survey those individuals to test my assumptions about where their interests are. Maybe I ask them what experts do they turn to for advice about X, and then I can now go into those experts and reach the larger audience that I'm looking for. And so I end up with the compiled list, leads generated in the survey sessions. Of course, I make offers to those leads. Then I generate additional leads using other people's audiences. And then finally, both lists together get a tested campaign. So it's a strategic approach. Now, again, our brains want to simplify things. We want to go online, search for a piece of information, get that information, and then there's a dopamine release and you feel like you've done something. We want to go to our favorite commentator, and when they recommend a VPN service, we're just going to get it because all the reasons why you should have a VPN sound very important. Not realizing that a lot of the VPN services today are data collection points. They, again, pipeline information down to a narrow point because all your internet traffic now goes across this secure bridge, which they can then track and commoditize and support because you paid with a credit card. And now they know you are who you say you are. And now they can tag what kind of websites you go to, what kind of products you buy online, what kind of interests you have. And so that $2 a month VPN turns out to cost you much more. Now, there are malicious VPN services where people are actually doing this on purpose and they're injecting malware and they're building bot networks. But there's also identity theft services that monitor your credit score. You have to read the fine print. Now, the solution is to avoid a simple solution or something that we just do, and then to avoid the overly complex, we're looking for the elegant solution. So in my program, How to Become Internet Invisible, we don't have 50 different products to use. We kind of have a procedure to understand that if you're surfing with a secure browser, you shouldn't use your email address to opt into mailing lists, because now you've identified that you not only use secure browsers, but who you are by your email. And so there are tools to help you have custom use email addresses or custom use credit cards. There's the factor that your VPN may be secure, but in your browser, such as the Chrome browser, for example, you've logged in, and now even though you're going over a secure transit, the details about your activities are now being cataloged as part of an extension on your browser or the browser itself. So when we're working on research and development, for example, that's where I do a lot of work, especially on the Bank Secrecy Act, where we're working with regulators, or product development or advanced development. You're not going to use the typical tools. So for example, you might have a computer that's set aside and the only thing you do on that computer is general research, but you have so many filters on the network, not necessarily your local computer, that you can only do that research in perhaps a paid database or qualified sites. And by doing that, even though it's all locked down, you're preventing a lot of the tracking that could throw signals to Facebook and Google and other things. Now, I understand most folks on this call are not developing products that would compete with Google or that would compete with Apple or would compete with other people. That just happens to be a large percentage of my consulting work when I'm working with somebody, is that they have a $1 million idea. And so we want to make sure that gets to market and profits them rather than somebody else getting to market first and then securing a patent claim or securing the first mover advantage. Another thing we want to consider, and this is very important, is you want to be mindful about how you choose a solution, but you don't want to be doing that for a long period of time. So we're going to rely on experts that we've hired to do work rather than just going online and looking for answers, because most public content on the internet is intended for advertising purposes. It's not there to educate you. Even these courses on Coursera and LinkedIn Marketplace and stuff, they're not necessarily there to educate you in something that you can solve problems with. They'll tend to fill time. They'll do entertainment. They will not deliver unless you have a plan to extract from that course certain things that you will then take action on. So I guess the bottom line here is, first, you do want to protect your security and privacy, because what you do on the internet has a high value to big tech, to hackers, to a lot of different people. Number two is you want to make sure that you're monitoring those signals in your environment that could telegraph a negative situation. So monitoring your credit score, for example, helps you prevent identity theft. So does bookkeeping, doing proper bookkeeping, checking your P&L statements, checking your bank statements. There's other factors such as an undue interest in something that you have going on in your corporation that you haven't announced publicly. I'm not saying you need to be paranoid, but being paranoid will help you protect something that's worth protecting. And then finally is you want to vet all the products and services that you use. Now, the usage is most important. If you have the very best VPN on your laptop, but every time you sit down at Starbucks, you just open up the plain Wi-Fi and you just start working, then that perfect VPN, that clean privacy browser, that password protection all goes away, because now you're plain text sending stuff across a local Wi-Fi that could be compromised. There have been a number of instances where somebody set up a fake Wi-Fi in order to get laptop connections so that they can then track the laptops and then do either counterintelligence or corporate espionage. Now remember, most of what I do, even though I've worked for defense contractors and stuff, most of what I'm doing today is about protecting corporate information, reducing reputational risk, reducing fraud, reducing risks associated with money laundering or politically connected parties. So when I have a client that is a politician or somebody who works in the government, or I have a client who's a writer or an investigative journalist, or I have a client who's an executive in a business who talks about sensitive business acquisitions, we're focusing on the most eloquent solution for their particular needs, but also the process for implementing it and making sure that they are consistent about the use and application. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. I hope this has stimulated some thought about how to protect yourself, how to keep yourself invisible when it comes to developing resources or new business opportunities, and then ultimately the value of vetting those relationships, vetting those tools, and really understanding some of the complexity so that you can be more agile, more resilient in an ever-changing marketplace. I'm here to help you transform business relationships into profits. If you have any questions about what I've covered here, please visit www.insidestrategicrelations.com, where we have a free newsletter, courses. You can ask questions on the contact page. We have a lot of valuable resources to help business owners and executives gain an unusual competitive advantage in their markets. Thanks for listening.